Hello everyone. Welcome to Learn English with Stories. Today's story is called The Biggest Mistake I Ever Made. Listening to stories is one of the best ways to improve your English naturally. So don't worry if you don't understand every word. Just relax, enjoy the story, and your English will improve little by little. Now, let's begin. A few years ago, I made a mistake that I will never forget. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. In fact, I thought it was just another ordinary decision. I told myself that everything would be fine. I believed I had plenty of time, but I was wrong. Looking back now, I can clearly see where everything started to change. It wasn't one huge mistake. It was a series of small choices, and those small choices slowly became the biggest mistake I ever made. At that time, I had just finished my studies. Like many people my age, I was excited about the future. I had so many plans. I wanted a good job. I wanted to become independent. I wanted to make my family proud. Every day, I imagined how different my life would be in a year. I believed success was just around the corner. But instead of taking action, I spent most of my time making plans. I bought a notebook. I wrote down my goals. I watched motivational videos. I searched for advice online. I even created a daily schedule. Everything looked perfect on paper. The only problem was, I wasn't actually doing anything. Every morning I told myself, I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became next month. Before I realized it, 6 months had passed. Nothing had changed. One afternoon, I met an old friend at a small cafe. We hadn't seen each other for a long time. As we talked, I noticed how much his life had changed. He had found a job. He was learning new skills. He seemed more confident than ever before. I was happy for him. But at the same time, I couldn't stop comparing my life to his. On my way home, I kept thinking about our conversation. We had started from the same place. We had similar dreams. So why was his life moving forward while mine stayed exactly the same? That question stayed in my mind for days. A week later, I opened the notebook where I had written all my goals. The pages were still clean. Nothing had been crossed off. Nothing had been completed. For the first time, I realized that dreaming about success and working for success are two completely different things. That realization was painful. Not because someone had criticized me, but because I had disappointed myself. That evening, I sat quietly in my room. I turned off my phone. I closed my laptop. There were no distractions, just me and my thoughts. I asked myself a simple question. What is stopping me? I wanted to blame my situation. I wanted to blame bad luck. I wanted to blame the economy. But deep inside, I already knew the answer. The biggest thing stopping me was me. That truth was difficult to accept, but it was also the beginning of something important. The next morning, I woke up with a different mindset. I decided that instead of making another perfect plan, I would take one small action. No matter how small it was, I picked up my notebook again. This time, I didn't write new goals. Instead, I wrote only one sentence. Start today. I looked at those 2 words for a long time. Then I closed the notebook, picked up my bag, locked the front door, and walked outside, not knowing that this simple decision would completely change the direction of my life. The cool morning air hit my face as I stepped outside. For a few moments, I simply stood there. I didn't have a perfect plan. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sitting at home waiting for life to change. I was finally moving. I decided to visit the public library. It had been years since I had been there. As I walked through the entrance, I noticed students reading quietly, people working on laptops, and others searching for books. Everyone seemed to have a purpose. Seeing that motivated me. I found a quiet table and opened my notebook. Instead of writing another list of dreams, I wrote down 3 simple tasks for the day. Update my resume, apply for 2 jobs, spend 1 hour improving my English. That was all. Nothing complicated, nothing impossible. I finished the first task before lunchtime. Then I applied for 2 jobs online. It didn't take as long as I had imagined. The hardest part had simply been getting started. Before going home, I spent an hour listening to an English podcast and writing down new words. When I returned home that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt productive. The next day, I followed the same routine. Then the next day, and the day after that. Some days were easier than others. There were mornings when I wanted to stay in bed. There were afternoons when I felt discouraged because no company replied to my applications. Sometimes I questioned whether my efforts were making any difference, but I remembered something. 6 months had disappeared because I kept saying, "I'll start tomorrow." I didn't want to make the same mistake again, so I kept going, 1 step at a time. After a few weeks, something unexpected happened. My confidence began to grow, not because I had achieved something amazing, but because I was finally keeping the promises I made to myself. One afternoon, I received an email inviting me to a job interview. I read it 3 times just to make sure it was real. A smile slowly appeared on my face. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for. That evening, I prepared carefully. I practiced common interview questions. I ironed my clothes. I checked the company's location. I wanted to be ready. The next morning, I arrived 20 minutes early. As I sat in the waiting area, I looked around. Some people looked confident. Others looked nervous. I realized that everyone there wanted the same opportunity. When my name was called, I took a deep breath and walked into the interview room. The interview wasn't perfect. I answered some questions well. I struggled with a few others, but I stayed honest. I stayed calm, and I did my best. After the interview, I walked outside feeling unsure. I had no idea what the result would be. For the next few days, I checked my phone every few hours. Each time it rang, my heart beat a little faster. Then, one afternoon, the phone finally rang. I answered immediately. The person on the other end introduced themselves from the company. I listened carefully. Then I heard the words I had been hoping for. "We'd like to offer you the position." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I closed my eyes and smiled. But as I thanked them and ended the call, I had no idea that starting this job would teach me an even bigger lesson than finding it. I started my new job the following Monday. I was excited. I was also nervous. Everything was new. The people, the workplace, the responsibilities. For the first few days, I made several small mistakes. Sometimes I forgot simple instructions. Sometimes I worked more slowly than everyone else. At first, I felt embarrassed. I wondered if I was good enough for the job, but instead of giving up, I reminded myself why I was there. I wasn't expected to know everything on the first day. I was there to learn, so I paid close attention. I asked questions when I didn't understand something. I listened carefully to advice. Every evening, I thought about what I had learned that day. Little by little, I improved. A few months later, my work became easier. I felt more confident. I understood my responsibilities. I even started helping new employees when they had questions. One afternoon, during my lunch break, I opened the same notebook that had been sitting on my desk for months. I turned to the first page. There were my old goals, the same goals that once felt impossible. Then I turned to another page. It had only 2 words written on it. "Start today." I smiled. Those 2 simple words had changed everything. At that moment, I finally understood what my biggest mistake had been. It wasn't failing an interview. It wasn't being rejected. It wasn't lacking experience. My biggest mistake was believing that I had plenty of time. I kept waiting for the perfect moment. I kept making excuses. I kept saying, "I'll start tomorrow." But tomorrow never comes unless you decide to make today count. That was the lesson life taught me. Success doesn't belong to the smartest people. It doesn't always belong to the luckiest people. Very often, it belongs to the people who are willing to begin, even when they're afraid, even when they don't know exactly what will happen. Looking back now, I'm actually grateful for that mistake. Without it, I might never have changed. I might still be waiting, still making excuses, still dreaming instead of doing. If you're listening to this story today and you're waiting for the perfect time to start something, whether it's learning English, applying for a job, learning a new skill, or following your dream, please remember this. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need the courage to take the first step. Because one small action today is worth more than 100 perfect plans for tomorrow. That is the biggest lesson I learned. And it's a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I hope you enjoyed it and learned some useful English along the way. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life English stories. Every story on this channel is created to help you improve your English naturally while enjoying meaningful and relatable experiences. Now I'd love to hear from you. What is one goal you've been putting off, and what small step can you take today? Share your answer in the comments below. I always enjoy reading your thoughts. Thank you for listening. Take care, keep practicing your English, and I'll see you in the next story.